Hello, and welcome back to Beyond Profit, a global perspective. Today, I want to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Now, there's a lot I could say about it, but I'm not going to. I'm not an expert at every aspect of it, but I am quite interested in the relationship between AI and education. I've got some pretty strong opinions on this, and I thought maybe it would be worthwhile to share some of those opinions with you. So, I'm going to do two things in this video. First, I'm going to talk about how students should respond to AI, and then about how teachers should respond to it. So let's get to it. So before I get started, just wanted to remind all of you that if you get a lot of value out of these videos, please like, share, subscribe, spread the good news. And likewise, if you want to come to the University of St. Mary and study with me, I would absolutely love to have you as part of my program and love to teach you and have you share this awesome experience here. So as I said, I want to talk about AI. Now you might think it's kind of an interesting or curious choice, this idea of addressing both students and how they should do AI and also professors or teachers and how they should do AI. You might ask yourself, why are we doing both in the same video? And the reason why is because I want students to understand how teachers think and teachers also to sort of think a little bit about things from the student's perspective. So I think it's worth looking at both sides of this issue. Let me first say, as I said before, there's a lot to say about AI, and a lot of it actually I think is pretty positive. We hear a lot about the dangers and about the sort of negative things that may happen with AI, but I think there's a lot of positive potential. It's an incredible tool. It's something that is being used a lot in industry, business. And I think that any student that doesn't take it seriously, that doesn't learn how to use it or use it effectively or figure out how it is going to be used in the industry that they enter in, is going to be at a disadvantage. It's current technology. I think you've got to know about it. And like I said, it has a lot of potential to do a lot of good things. All right, so you know what I'm going to do. I am actually going to use an AI tool when I'm done making this video to try to come up with a description of the video, to try to help me with tools that will improve my analytics. And of course, in the end, is it going to do me any good? Probably not. About 6 people click on it in the end. So maybe AI isn't all that it's cracked up to be, but I use it too. I'm going to use it here. And maybe you should use it too. Sometimes, in some ways. There are also some important ethical issues to think about here too. First of all, there's the intellectual property question, right? I'm sure you're aware that artificial intelligence machines, if you will, gather massive amounts of data. Well, where do they get that data? Oftentimes it could be databases, but oftentimes it's just stuff off the internet. And so there's loads of things I put up on the internet. There are copyrighted providers that put stuff on the internet. Maybe you've put stuff on the internet. And what it does, it just sweeps up all this information and without attribution or permission, scrambles it up and reuses it again. And so there are some important questions, I think, about, how does someone get compensation, or do these machines actually have a right to just go and gather this information freely without the express permission or authorization of those who provide the information in the first place? So, this is sort of a new area, but I do think that you have to think a little bit about this, right? If you're using AI, you are borrowing information from people without their consent. And likewise, others may be taking information from you without your consent. And so, like I said, that's probably the first major ethical question I think maybe that you have to wrestle with a little bit as you make this decision about what to do. I think a bigger question, really, a more pressing question for students is, how do you use it to help you in your education? And like I said, I think there are great uses potentially, right? If it helps you know how to use certain tools to gain certain information that will help you in a future career or business situation, I think that's absolutely fine. There are, I think, ethical or useful ways maybe to use it in a classroom educational situation as well. for me, I don't think that there's a problem with students having a conversation with an AI bot, for example. Let's say that you've got a project and you're not sure what to do with it, and you type in the AI machine, what ideas do you have for a project like this? And it may offer you some ideas. I think that that kind of brainstorming is perhaps a good thing. Or to say, here's some things that I thought about. Is there anything I'm missing? Are there any other things that we should look at? And I think that, using it sort of in the same way as you would use an internet search engine, or in the same way as you would use something like basic, like Wikipedia, I think that that's potentially okay. A lot of people have talked about citing AI as your source, like ChatGPT or whatever that is. And there are ways, of course, to cite it. I'm a bit agnostic about citation, to be honest. It's my view that you shouldn't be copying and pasting stuff from an AI source anyway. And I'm not sure that you should be using that source as an absolute authority. Let's say that you're asking a question, like, there's some project that you're working on and it gives you some answers, some ideas, right? Well, what I would do is rather than trust the AI for that information, I would probably use that as a springboard to do research from other sources and then cite those sources rather than, oh, hey, I'm citing this AI. You should trust it as a source.
So, students, I'm going to give you a word of advice, priceless advice, and that is AI is not that good, at least not that good yet, and there are huge validity problems. So I'll just tell you from my experience looking at a lot of papers, a lot of times I can tell if a paper is generated by AI because the information is just wrong. I don't know if you've tried using Google's, you Google something and then up at the top it sort of has this AI generated answer and you click on it and then sometimes it's partially right, but it's not completely right. Well, all of the AI search engines that you're using, the generators that you're using, are doing the same kind of thing. They're gathering a lot of different information from a lot of different sources, and a lot of times they can't discern what is right or wrong or true or false. To make things even worse, when you're asking them to do something, they don't necessarily know if you want accurate information or inaccurate information. So not only can they not find it, but if you want it badly enough, they will make it up for you, because the purpose of the AI is to answer your question and solve your problem, and those parameters aren't really built into that machine very well. And so you may run into some huge problems just in terms of your paper being stupid because it's just not working the way you think it's going to work.
Students, if they make style recommendations, if you're using it to try to maybe proofread your paper, just treat them as recommendations. Like I said, AI is not super great at fixing lots of things. Sometimes, even if you use something like Grammarly that relies on AI, which I've checked out before, sometimes their recommendations are really great, and sometimes they don't exactly make sense. It's really awkward and stupid and weird and backward. And so, just simply trusting that this machine is going to solve your problem for you is probably, like I said, it's a tool, but it's not something you can absolutely count on. I think that you should probably go to more than one source, and maybe even if you're not the best writer, try to find somebody who's in your class or somebody who is a good writer. Have them look over it. That old-fashioned way of just trying to find a team and work together and that kind of thing, I think that works a lot better than just sort of like saying Grammarly says so or ChatGPT says so, so therefore, it is. And that also is going to prevent false positives from popping up if anyone is using an AI detection software program, which there are a lot of those around. And they're somewhat useful as far as figuring out whether or not someone really has engaged in acts of academic integrity violations by using AI. But I think the bigger question really is, how much work do you want AI to do for you? And I think if you're being honest with yourself, you have to ask yourself, why are you pursuing an education? If my purpose really is just to get that piece of paper, that diploma that says, hey, I graduated, and use that as evidence to show some potential employer that you finished something and that's your access point to get into a job, then, the education itself is secondary to the outcome. And I know a lot of people think that way. It's like all I need to do is go to college, or I need to get a grad degree. Once I get that degree, then it'll open all sorts of doors for me. And the truth is it will. Someone who gets a college degree statistically is going to make a whole lot more money than somebody who doesn't have one. Somebody who has a grad degree statistically is going to make more than somebody who doesn't have the grad degree, right? And the higher up you go, the more money you're going to make. And so that makes it very lucrative. It makes it very attractive. But I think that's a dangerous line if that's sort of where you're going, because there are ways that you could use ChatGPT to get that piece of paper and short circuit the whole process. I'm sure you're familiar with this, right? If I took a prompt that a professor offers me and says, hey, and basically copied and pasted that thing and stuck it into ChatGPT or an equivalent AI machine, I might get what looks like a really nice looking paper, and I can turn that paper in. And it may or may not do well, but who knows? If the professor doesn't check, if you can otherwise get away with it, then maybe you'll get a C paper, maybe even a B paper or something like that. You can skate on through and not learn anything. Get your piece of paper, try to make your access. The problem is at that point, then you have to kind of scam the rest of your way through your existence, because there will come a time where somebody who really is an expert expects you to be able to do something that piece of paper implies that you're able to do. And if you can't, then you have failed yourself in that process. And so my recommendation is don't use AI that way, right? The more you use your own brain power, or the more you use AI as a research tool as opposed to something that's going to do your work for you, then the more you're going to get out of the experience, and the more likely you are to be successful and valuable to a future employer, to your family, to your community, and so on. And so you become a better version of yourself. So, and really, it's kind of a position of honesty. It's kind of, you're doing the right thing just because it's the right thing to do. Is it possible to get away with that sort of stuff? Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. Is it okay? Well, ethically, it's probably not. And from a self experience, you really are cheating yourself out of that experience. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about this from a teacher or a professor's perspective. Now, there are a couple of different ways that I've heard people respond to the challenge of AI, those of us who are educators, right? One is to be completely strict about it and say that, there's no place for it in the classroom, students shouldn't be using it, we're going to penalize students, for doing it. And I think, with some exceptions, it's quite possible for students to get away with it, but that is what it is. Kind of the opposite perspective that I've read from some people in the education field is don't worry about it, right? Like, let students do whatever students are going to do. If they're going to cheat, I can't control it. Let them do it. It's going to cause them to suffer in the long run. I can maybe warn them about that suffering, but whatever. My perspective, I think, is a little bit more nuanced. Um, it's true. I can't really stop students from doing this. I can't control what they're going to do. And the decisions they make are their own, and the consequences that they face are their own too. So there's not a lot I can do about that. Now, I do have some tools for possibly detecting AI. And of course, I also have my common sense, some of which, is meshed in with what I talked about from the student perspective. Like, we are experts. We know when things don't seem right, and we can grade things accordingly. And so, there are ways of trying to figure this out. In some of the plagiarism detection software, such as Turnitin, there is an option in there that allows you to figure out, whether or not a student has used AI in that paper. The problem is, at least at the moment, it's not really great. It might say there's a 60% chance that the student used AI in the writing of this paper, or there's a 40% chance, or there's a 90% chance, or whatever. And that it won't specify or highlight what those areas are. So that's a bit problematic. Plus, what happens if there's a, like a plus what happens if there's a false positive? You don't want to punish a student if it's something that they didn't actually do. So I'll tell you how I have handled the situation in the past. And like I said, I want students to hear this as well, because I think that it might empower you to think about ways to deal with a situation. Like, let's say you did do something that you shouldn't have done. I mean, maybe you should think a little bit about things from the professor's perspective, right? So there are several times where I have caught students using AI, and the way that I've tended to handle that is to contact the student directly, talk to them, email them, whatever, and tell them that, like, look, I have this report here that indicates that you probably used AI, or I have this reason to believe why, and here's why. Most of the time, when I have done that, my students have sort of fessed up. They've just said, hey, I was in a hurry and I stuck this thing in a search engine and, I submitted it and I'm sorry, right? And in a situation like that, I'm going to respect their honesty. And given the fact that this isn't like another form of academic uh, dishonesty, it's not something I can absolutely quantify or prove. I do give a little bit of leeway as far as that's concerned. So I will usually tell students, look, let's rewrite the paper then. Okay, let's set a new date. Let's get this done. Let's turn this into a learning experience. Let's talk a little bit about ways that you can properly use AI versus just using it to cheat and to try to get by without doing any work. So that's a conversation that we can have. And every time I've done that, I think the outcome has been very positive. In short, I really just think that opening up that conversation is the way to make it work. I will say that it's something that I would probably track, just like I would track cases of plagiarism. If a student in one class, in my class, or in a series of other classes is found using AI inappropriately, then I think it's absolutely legitimate to use university policies regarding academic integrity to fail the student for the assignment, or fail a student for the class, or have them dismissed from the program in some way. I think it's completely reasonable, especially if we've had that open conversation and we've tried to turn this into a learning experience. If the student continues to abuse, then there should be consequences in that situation. We are still in early stages as far as trying to figure out what to do with AI and the best way to approach it. So anything I say today could be obsolete tomorrow. I'm sure it's probably going to be obsolete in another year or two, but I still think these are issues that are worth discussing. Students, I would challenge you to do the right thing. Get the most out of your education. Don't use AI to cut corners. Use it as a good tool, as technology, something that might help you in your career in the future, something that might help you generate ideas, something that is, shouldn't be trusted 100%, a starting point on research, but definitely not an ending point. And teachers, I would recommend a bit of grace, a bit of understanding. Use this as an opportunity to try to connect with students, to try to explain to them why there's great value in not cutting corners and how they can use AI in a way that would be positive and not negative. For Beyond Profit, Global Perspective, I'll see you guys next time.